So then we are back with the modern understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzaielic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end period Shiahu the prophet. We find then the area of relation with the restoration of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries, and also we find the restoration of the Gentiles, obviously related with the trade then given back to the first son, Ishmael. We find these precisely on Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, where you find then both the sticks being restored. Understandably, the Messiah then spoke of the trade of the end on the 8th chapter of Galah, and then 10 chapters later. So let's try to understand what goes on then in the South Pacific. There are news from, for instance, New Zealand. The exports have taken then even Australia for the first time ever. So then the islands of the Pacific are truly lining up themselves for the new system. And we can observe these in the entire Pacific region, in the Asian market, mostly from China, where then the trade via computer then is established. So then Daniel, when we read then the angel is speaking with him, then the time of then to and fro would be the time of the seat from 1009 to 2009, ending with then a high peak of knowledge, 08 and 09. And then after 09, then we've entered the time of the dragon. So there is a shift of what you used to know as far as trade with then the dragon's trade. It's not a bad term. It is related with precision, where then the midman is no longer required. You can be your own CEO, you can be your own investor, you can be your own purchaser. So then gives you the ability of wherever you are in the world, then invest in the system. Well, let's try to understand then what a nation should do as far as facing themselves with this new change. Because the Messiah already spoke of these areas related with the freighting, and then the freighters of the earth in charge of the world's market. So then when we understand Daniel, we find then a time of restoration, and then this very system is starting with the first northern kingdom, and then eastern kingdom and southern kingdom. Those are obviously the most powerful economic places of the world. We don't have the facts yet of those except China. But then, because of the system from the east, because of the trade and knowledge combined with the computer, then it is truly established. Then we understand many countries, they are already updating their backlogs, so then their subsystem becomes then positive, so they can obviously adapt themselves much easier if their numbers are then positive. So then, not only this, we find in China more than ever then the economy growing by leaps and bounds, indicating then shortly after the Chinese system then becoming available for the rest of the world. At the moment, we find very baby steps where we understand then the northern kingdom yet adjusting itself, because the northern kingdom, or then the Soviet Union, must become the second most powerful economy, and Africa then the third. Thus we understand the iron kingdoms from Daniel 11. Then what would be proper then for the other nations, such as ours at least, then facing the new system coming, would obviously then starting up a department where then the government would update and upgrade their tax code. Not only the existing tax code related with the transfer of funding, but then lining up with the freighters, upgraded the entire purchasing system of our country, because there are products coming without taxation. Many of them are not taxed, including internet sales. Most importantly, because the internet sales must be then later linked up with the main trade of the end. The system, when it comes, does not mean that you are going to be exclusively dealing only with a system. You can deal with the multiple systems, but then your main investment comes from the Eastern system. Obviously then you invest and you can make a transfer of a funding from then the Chinese system to any place you want. As far as how much you are paying for taxes then because of the transfer of this funding, then it's another situation. It depends on how the banks are going to act then in the future. Very shortly, 36 months. How is the government going to maintain then some taxation? We don't know. There is not yet a place where you can make a reference of. We do know from the Chinese system the government can't read what you have. This is a must, because it is then a closed circuitry where they have the rights protecting then the system. And the only way of receiving taxation from the system is via then what is sent to our country via freighting. But thus far we find products coming to our country and some of them does not even have the inspection. Some of the products coming, they have no UL inspection of any other kind. So then if they're not inspected properly, can you imagine taxation wasn't even given? So how are we going then to deal with this situation as far as our tax code is concerned? Because the dragon system is in China. We must understand the upgrading of our own subsystem, so then we can become partners with the new system yet coming. Because the more we read the instructions, the more we understand what those mean. And obviously then, starting up with freighters, then coming together, evaluating what they can do, then for the government to use their tracking system as a means of taxation. There is no other option, because the government obviously is not gathering enough taxes. And that's a big problem. So then, wishful thinking. Let's then evaluate wishful thinking versus then the truth. Let's evaluate what people can do versus what must be done. Let's evaluate what people desire versus what it should be done. And understandably, many areas then are related with those first, second, and third kingdoms. From the fourth until the last country, those are then random. It could be any country, the fourth, but we understand the first is China, the second the Soviet Union, and the third is Africa. There is no way of switching them around. We can't do this anymore, because whatsoever was done in the past done won't be used during this time. This is what we are facing, was a pre-selected plan more than 2,500 years ago. It's not going to change. That's why then Daniel was given the understanding people would go to and fro for 1,000 years, then would come a peak of knowledge from tradesperson explaining then what would be then the trade of the end. Then when you combine a high knowledge from a tradesperson related with trade, you understand the computer. There is only a country with the most powerful computerized trade system, and that is China. Thus you understand the dragon. So the US system won't work for very long if we don't tax properly via the freighters. So then it would be truly imperative having our tax code updated and then lined up, and then having then the freighters let the government use their tracking system for taxation purposes. So then when the system comes, then the nation is already lined up with freighting. There is no solution other than doing what then the Messiah was then stating. So then what can we expect of the future if we don't do this? We can expect, firstly then, as last year was explained, United States had purchased the war from Israel and then Gaza. It didn't work. That they are at war again. We gave them a lot of money to play around with this aerospace defense system, and there they are, wasting our money. They are at war again with Gaza. And then we find ourselves then obviously not improving our economy. And then we understand there is a new system coming. But not only this, what can we expect? Israel involving then itself in more wars, more fierce wars, until they realize they must start then tabernacling. And the path was already given. North Sudan should have then the first tabernacling, because there is a second anointed granted as they are obedient what the Messiah said for them to do and observe. So this situation over there with Israel in Gaza is going to become a whole lot worse, and then other nations are going to get involved with them, and Israel is going to sense they're going to be then wiped out of the map until they realize they must start the second tabernacle services. Then we find Europe. Obviously the Eurozone is breaking. North America, unfortunately, the economy is very bad. But then the BRICS is the starting of the new system yet coming. And at some point, China is going to hire the services of the Northern Kingdom. Can be sure of it 100%. Because Daniel 11 is related with the specific understanding of these kingdoms starting then the trade of the end. It's the generation or the initiation of the system. And obviously starts with infrastructure. From then on, not only of those countries related with the BRICS, but then other areas such as Panama Canal, next year must be open, and making the Panama Canal then a trading post of the Americas, because it's a halfway from north and south. Then you find the BRICS, then the Soviets leading the BRICS. Then you find the Southern Kingdom under Mr. Zuma's representatives, then visiting with other countries of Africa, in lining up the plan for the future. Then you find New Zealand. They have even overtaken Australia in exports for the first time. These, you know what these means? Indicates a trading post. Obviously in the southern part of the island, because the northern part belongs mostly to the natives. So then the southern island becomes then the trading post of the South Pacific. So then the South Pacific then becomes covered. Europe then, until they resolve what to do with the Eurozone, but it won't last for very long. Then you find the trading post of the Americas, obviously Panama. Not only having Pacific and Atlantic, but then a trading post, because then it helps northern Brazil to bring then their ores or their materials and do trade in Panama. Because Brazil, they don't have as many freighting ships. There's roughly a couple hundred of them, maybe more. So obviously Panama would be a trading post. And then until the Balian system is dealt with most in Europe and North America, then the drag then obviously comes from the east. This plan can't be changed. Firstly then we understand Northern Kingdom, East and South, those must remain. As far as the other moves, we don't know yet, because we don't have the luxury of asking a prophet. There is not tabernacling yet available. But because of the importance of Panama, the importance of the South Pacific, then you can understand what would be taking place. Understandably, if we don't work in our taxation, then the government is going to the Ozarks. So rather than the police doing their job, the FBI doing their job, the CIA doing their job, finding out who is stealing money from the government, then they try to make a club for themselves. But the Messiah was very clear. He said the freighters of the earth would be in charge. So you can expect Israel more troubles. You can expect our country then to become isolated from the rest of the world, because our system then is breaking in order to give way to the yen, the Chinese yen, so then the system becomes available for the rest of the world. So then the nations can be in line with freighting. Thus then later the Ishmaelites received the stick of authority of trade, and then tabernacling. So trying to do otherwise or any other way is a wishful thinking, but it's not going to work. Let's watch then the news, because what was said last year was proving to be true. The purchase of the war was a mistake. We gave away more of our money and then the war returned. So then a department in our government dealing with freighting in updating the tax code. These would be the wisest move ever as far as understanding our economy.